A few years ago, I was in Amsterdam for a weekend away with my girlfriend. It was one of the first holidays we ever went on together, so I remember it quite fondly. On it, we did a few guided tours, and one tour guide mentioned something that stuck with me ever since. According to him, the house behind me is the narrowest in the world. He told me property owners in the 1600s were taxed based on the width of their building's facade. So, landowners would build houses with facades as narrow as possible to avoid paying tax. It's a great story, the kind a tour guide should tell. Unfortunately, it also isn't really true. First of all, it's not the narrowest house in the world. Hell, it isn't even the narrowest house in Amsterdam. It is the narrowest facade, but the rest of the house fans out behind it into something pretty normal sized. The owner wasn't living in a 1 meter wide corridor. Second, and this is the part that really surprised me with how widespread the fact is, I couldn't find any clear historical source confirming there was ever a specific tax in Amsterdam calculated on the width of the facade. And believe me, I tried. I looked at the city archives and cross-referenced old tax records from the 1730s up to 1805, and none of them ever mentioned the facades. Or at least I think I did. To be honest, it was sort of difficult to verify whether I was looking at the correct property because Amsterdam is old and they've used a lot of very different systems for keeping track of buildings over the years. The records do mention the rental value of the property though, which was a little over 16 guilders in all the records I checked from over the years. That rental value is what the taxes were actually based on. Canal frontage did drive up that value, so wider houses on the canal did usually pay more tax, but not because they were wider. According to the same tax records, the building right next door had a rental value of about 20 guilders. Still more, obviously, but the building seems to be about 4 to 5 times wider, so whatever the reason is the facade is so narrow, a massive tax dodge doesn't seem to be it. So why are there so many narrow buildings in Amsterdam? Well, there are a few theories, but unfortunately the most likely is also the most boring. Land was expensive, so were foundations, so narrow was just cheaper. Add to that the city pre-divided land into narrow plots so more people could have access to the canals, and that probably explains most of the narrow buildings. Of course, maybe taxation did play a role. Maybe they were able to argue rent was lower when the facade was narrower, but that almost certainly isn't the main reason. There's one more thing I wanted to mention about this place. This is just someone's house. I tried to find out who lives here and what they think about tourists taking picture with their house, but it seems they've never commented it publicly. Or at least I wasn't able to find anything. I'm sure whoever owns and or lives here knew it was a bit of a tourist attraction before moving in, and it's hard to feel too sorry for them since they're probably quite wealthy. But if my house was a tourist attraction, I know I would be at least a little bit annoyed. So I don't think you should actually come here, especially since the actual narrowest house in Amsterdam is a place you can actually go inside. For that, we need to go about 1 kilometer that way. Hi there. It's the next day and we are about 90 kilometers not that way. I did go to the real narrowest house, but it was in an extremely busy area and I felt kind of uncomfortable filming with so many people around. So instead I got a bunch of B-roll and I'm doing the actual video from here. This is Oude Hoogstraat 22, the actual narrowest house in Amsterdam. It's about 2 meters wide and 5 meters deep. Unlike the other house, that's it. It doesn't spread out when you go inside. Today, it's home to a small tea shop called Het Kleinste Huis, or in English, the smallest house. I'd planned on having lunch there for the video, but unfortunately it's closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, which are the only days I actually go to Amsterdam for work. It's run by a couple called Kirsten and Niels, and the building has actually been in Kirsten's family for over 60 years. It's actually quite fitting that they decided to open a tea shop because literally right next door is the former headquarters of the Dutch East India Company, which aside from being pretty horrible, and that's putting it lightly, were also the first people to bring back tea to Europe from China, before even the English did. So if you want to see a narrow house in Amsterdam, come here. Don't go to some random person's house. Go have a nice cup of tea. Although you should probably check the opening hours before you do. Now, I do think I'll go get some lunch somewhere. That ending would have made so much more sense if I actually recorded this in front of the smallest house. But I didn't. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye.